Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Loch Lomond's Golden Year in Review tasting. My name's Mitch Bechard. I am the co-host of Not Another Whiskey podcast, and I'm going to be hosting you guys through this journey of Loch Lomond this evening. And we're actually at the Loch Lomond Distillery right now. This is the amazing tasting room. The distillery is literally 50 feet behind us. And I'm joined by two legends within the whiskey industry. So I have Mr. Joel Harrison over here, who is a spirit writer, broadcaster, and can I call you a spirit sage?
Spirit sage is good, I'll go with that.
You want to put that on your business card now?
That's my new title.
I like that one. And obviously a gentleman that doesn't need any introduction, Mr. Michael Henry, who is the master blender of Loch Lomond. Michael, thanks so much for being here.
And I'll say it's great to be here this evening. Just to have this opportunity to kind of look back on the last 12 months and kind of share with people like the kind of recognition that we've had and kind of really how that's impacted us here at the distillery.
I know Joel and I are looking forward to picking your brains on all things Loch Lomond here. But over the next hour, guys, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling back the curtain on what makes Loch Lomond tick. You know, this is a distillery that's had an absolutely amazing year, a golden year. And when I say golden, I mean International Wine and Spirits Competition, Distillery of the Year, multiple golds and double gold medals from the San Francisco Spirit Awards and the IWSC, and a platinum gold 4-inch Monin 12. So unbelievable. And that's just to name a few. I was thinking the other day, Michael, I think your trophy cabinet here must be kind of like sort of Real Madrid, you know what I mean? It must be absolutely mad. Have you guys had to get an engineer in to reinforce it?
I think everything we've done over the last kind of 10 years, we've just grown so fast, whether it's office space for people, casks in the warehouses, you know, everything, we've just been growing kind of at a phenomenal rate. And I think probably the trophy cabinet's one that's due for renewal.
Fantastic. Well, tonight we're going to taste through 4 of these award-winning whiskies, dig into how they're made with Michael, and we're going to try and answer some of your questions along the way. We know the chat's already been going live on YouTube, which is fantastic. Please keep pinging them through. We will try and answer as many as we can as we go through this session. So I think it's time to get the glasses ready and get tasting some Loch Lomond's. But I think before we do that, what have you guys been up to before we came here? You were just back home, right?
Yeah, so probably people know from my accent I'm not Scottish, but I'm from fairly close by, from the north coast of Ireland. So I was back home in Portstewart for a couple of days, just visiting family. And the weather, well, I have to say, sun always shines in the north coast, so we were out at the beach, the park, the barbecues going, so it was just a great couple of days with the family.
Nice. And Michael, when you go back there, are you drinking Scotch whiskey or Irish whiskey?
I'm probably drinking both. I have a foot in each camp there, but it was great. You know, from Portstewart, which is about 2 miles from Royal Portrush Golf Club. So, you know, we'll be back with Loch Lomond at Royal Portrush in the summer for the Open Golf. So it's good to get home and see that kind of buzz starting to come about the town and the North Coast as a whole.
Are you a golfer?
No.
You like watching it though?
Probably there's a good reason I don't play golf. I'm probably more suited to rugby, and rugby's kind of my thing.
I used to play a lot of golf when I was younger, but I just don't have the patience for it anymore. No. I get to like the 5th hole and I'm like, all right.
Yeah, let's get to the bar.
Yeah, get to the 19th hole.
It's a strange one because I don't have the patience for golf, but I have the patience to wait 10 years on a whiskey.
See, I'm the same. I've got patience for crazy golf, but not for actual golf. That's my limits. Yeah.
What about you, Joel? You've been doing a little bit of international travel, right?
Bit of international travel. So I've been out in Hong Kong, which has, if you ever get to go there, anybody watching gets to go there, fantastic whiskey scenes. So the vintage whiskey bars there are phenomenal and really well priced with incredible selections where you get to travel back in time through some amazing old bottlings. So flew in last week from a week in Hong Kong, which was great. And then, back into the madness of the UK and the whiskey scene at the moment. There's some amazing stuff being released, and nowhere shows that off better than Loch Lomond Distillery.
I do love Hong Kong. I just find it too muggy to drink Scotch whiskey over there.
It was quite warm. Yeah. It's plenty of highballs.
I like hot, but when it gets that humid, it's like brutal.
How about yourself, Mitch? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm based up in Speyside, so we just did a massive event for 20 people, where we did a load of whiskey stuff, but we also did a load of different things. Like we took them to the coast, and we coast steering. You get them in wetsuits, and everyone jumps off cliffs and stuff. Yeah, we did all that. It was great. We were touring around Speyside, whiskey dinners, distillery tours.
Great.
So well, I'm still a bit exhausted. I think I had a chat with you yesterday, and I was just like, I'm so tired. But I'll be good today, so hopefully I can get my way through this. We'll see how we go. But let's chat first off just about. I think with Loch Lomond, one of the amazing things is you're balancing sort of tradition and innovation here, and it's a bonkers distillery, right? In the best possible way. You've got straight neck stills, swan neck stills, you've got column stills. I think it's the only distillery to do grain and single malt. Am I right in saying that? Under one roof?
Maybe a couple that have the capability to do it. I think it'd be like ourselves in Girvan, although Girvan has kind of Ailsa Bay and
there's no roof on Girvan.
But probably ourselves would be the one where it's done in one kind of building right next to each other.
I mean, it's incredible, and I think on the podcast we had Gary Mills on there, and he was saying, I think he mentioned it's 11 different types of distillate you guys can do. Do you agree with him there, or was he?
No, I think what we have is a core kind of range of distillation setups. So we have our straight neck pot stills that are really unique to Loch Lomond, and we have swan neck pot stills that you'll see kind of all Scotch distilleries. The swan necks we run in kind of a conventional way, the same as other distilleries would, but the straight neck stills, we run those in two different setups. So we run for 2 weeks with a very narrow spirit cut that gives us a really fruity, lightly fruity kind of new make spirit, and then for 1 week we run with a wider spirit cut, and that gives us a kind of more fuller bodied, rounder, fruity cut. So that's kind of our base spirits, and then we do peated variations of those. So for us, it's really about kind of creating as much flavour we can into the wash, and then using the wonderful stills that we have to capture or really target the flavours that we want from the wash into the new make spirit.
I suppose from a consumer point of view, that's amazing because you're producing so many different characteristics. But as a master blender, do you enjoy that? Is it, I've got all this to play with, or is it sometimes a bit overwhelming and a bit of a hindrance?
It's kind of what we have to do is kind of look at what makes Loch Lomond different, or what is it that we do really well. And for me, it's that kind of fruity character that we develop. We put a lot of work into kind of our mashing, our longer fermentations, the yeast we use, and then the stills themselves to capture all the fruit that we create. So that kind of fruitiness is something that kind of stands alone for us. We have our cooperage, so that allows us to really, when people taste Loch Lomond, we want them to taste the spirit, and having our own cooperage here allows us to control the quality of wood and the impact the wood has on our spirit. And we want really a soft background honey note from our casks, so that gives us the fruit from the stills, the honey from the casks, and lastly, again with our straight neck pot stills, when we distill peat in those, it gives it a very soft, kind of richly spicy peat character. It's a very unique peat character, so that's the kind of third pillar of our kind of distillery character, and that signature is something that we find, or that it's kind of my job to kind of showcase in all the expressions that we have. So it's like fruity, sweet, soft smoke. That's what that character kind of really identifies Loch Lomond. And although we have like this huge kind of capability to produce flavours. It's kind of bringing those flavours into that kind of recognisable signature character.
That must be a fascinating distillery to work with. I mean, Joel, you've been around a load of distilleries in your life, not just in Scotland, but around the world, right? What was your first experience of going around here?
Coming around here it is an incredible learning experience, firstly, because yes, it's a single malt distillery, but when you visit a lot of these kind of beautiful, small, whitewashed wall distilleries, they could be on Islay, they could be in Speyside or down in the lowlands, there's a very distinct process. There's a red thread from the minute you walk through the door to the whiskey that comes out the end. There's one flavour profile. It's why that distillery exists. It's why we have, the brilliant blended Scotch industry in Scotland, because there are 140 plus distinct single malt distilleries, which are then woven together in a tapestry for blends. But each one has its place, and master blenders for blending houses will talk about the consistency they want from those single malt distilleries. Here you've got a campus, it's a playground, it's a fairground of flavour, which is the most amazing thing about it.
You called it a flavour factory.
A flavour factory, right? It's exactly what it is, yeah. And you come around and you've got these beautiful classic copper pot stills, the swan neck copper pot stills. You've then got these incredible straight neck stills, which look like kind of stove top hats almost, and sort of almost something out of a Jules Verne novel, which are amazing. And then of course the column stills. But within those two types of copper pot still, the tunes you can play with those and the flavours that you get, you're a little self-sufficient factory here that's creating all these incredible flavours. And I think I've been here 6 times, and I'm still, every time I come, amazed by it and what it can produce, and what that gives you the ability to play with at the end in terms of bringing the flavour together. And then one of the things I really love about it, because I'm a massive fan of a wisp of peat in my whiskey, is the fact that you do have this gentle, delicate smoke in the background, which for me just is a dimension that I do love. Really big peaty whiskies, I love completely unpeated whiskies, but having that there in the background just gives it this extra dimension, which I love. I think it's brilliant.
That's a bit, I mean, we've talked about it a lot there, but should we drink some?
I think it would be rude not to.
Yeah.
At the distillery.
But I'm totally with you, Joel. Like, it blew my mind when I first came around here. It kind of reminded me of when I first started getting into whiskey. And I thought I got the distilling process, and then someone took me round Mortlach. And I was like, and I had almost the same experience coming around here again.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
But you find you learn something new every distillery you go around. You pick up a new fact, a way of contextualising the way the distillery works, and then you come here and you literally have to unlearn everything and then learn it again in a really lovely way.
I always say, whiskey's so great for constant homework, right?
Yeah.
No one knows everything about it. If they do, they're probably lying.
It's not bad homework, is it? Let's be honest.
Yeah. So, Michael, we're going to start with the Loch Lomond original here. I think this is a kind of introduction almost to Loch Lomond's signature style, right? Can you talk us through here how you put this together, what you get from the whiskey?
Yeah. So, with our spirits, we generally use a combination of a spirit from the different stills and different peat levels. So, like our stills, when it comes to the final expression, there'll be a mix of 2 or 3 unpeated styles and maybe 1 or 2 peated styles, and that allows us to really kind of get a depth of fruit character, and then very carefully control the peat, because we kind of base our expressions on the fruit, kind of supported by that honey sweetness from the oak, and then use a very soft, gentle peat as a seasoning. So just a little bit of peat to develop some depth, and that's so not for a big hit of peat, but just very soft, gentle peat for some depth, and then just a crispness on the finish. So with this Loch Lomond original, we get a lot of like apple, Seville orange, marmalade, that kind of vanilla, and honey.
Citrus fruit coming through. That's beautiful.
And that, for me, that honey note really manifests itself in it, mixed with that sort of delicate undertone of smoke, gives it a lovely earthy, almost like Manuka honey note, which is really almost warming on the nose. So you've got that beautiful fruit there that's a little bit lithe and a little bit more delicate, but you've also got this warming honey smoke underneath, which is absolutely cracking.
Peat's an interesting one right now. There's a lot of conversation about sort of terroir and peat. Do you buy into that at all? That the peat you use affects the flavour?
I think there's definitely an impact from where the peat is sourced on the flavour. And I think like distillers are kind of really starting to understand that and play with that. And there's an impact from the strength of peat, and I think again whiskey drinkers will understand the difference between like 25 ppm and 50 ppm. But what kind of makes Loch Lomond different is that we can take 50 ppm, it's like heavily peated malt, distill it 3 different ways and get 3 very different new make spirits. So the impact of distillation, the style of distillation has just as much impact on the flavour as where the peat's sourced or the strength of the peat on the malted barley. So again, peat is something that we are happy to play with, but again, it gives us something that other distillers, because they have the same shape of pot still, aren't able to kind of play around with in the way that we play around with.
That's interesting.
I think it's a really unique point there that you make about having these straight neck pot stills, which nobody else has, and running peat through those. And I don't know about you, Mitch, but I get so frustrated when people use the tasting note smoke, because there are so many different types of smoke. There's a woody, burnt sort of smoke. There's a smoke that's almost like a mossy smoke. There's that coal, dusty type smoke that you can get. And you even get it, the street that I live on, people have got wood burners, say what you want of that these days, but some people are burning different things. Some people have peat in there, some people have coke in there, some people have coal in there, some people have wood, and you can smell it as you walk down the street, the different types of smoke that come out of the chimneys. And I think that's a really, the type of peat smoke that you're getting here, you're bringing that ensembleage of peat flavours together to create something that, for me, manifests itself in a really, I think that's sort of on the mossy side of earthy. It almost feels like it's spongy in a really lovely way.
And that's with the still setups that we have. We can kind of leave the big kind of medicinal phenols in to get that kind of phenolic medicinal character. We can start to filter some of those out so we get more a smoky peat character, or we can use the straight neck stills with the very narrow spirit cut, and that takes all the kind of big aggressive phenols out of the spirit and leaves us with a very kind of spicy, tangy peat character. So we're able to get like notes from the peat that other distillers aren't able to achieve because of our still setup.
Cool.
Very cool. Joe, you write about whiskey a lot. How do you explain Loch Lomond when you're writing about it, or when you're just chatting to someone about it? How would you describe it?
So it's a kaleidoscope of a distillery in that respect. It definitely has this identifiable thread of what makes Loch Lomond, and there is a lot of talk in the whiskey drinking community at the moment about spirit style and spirit character, and also letting that breathe, letting that come through in whiskies that aren't too over mature and too heavy and too cask influenced. How do you describe Loch Lomond in that context? Well, of course, it's a lot of it is down to Michael's hard work in bringing that together to create something that is identifiable. It's like a band finding its voice, its sound.
You had to go there with the music.
I did have to go there with the music. You've got solo artists. It's easy for solo artists because they open their mouth and that's the voice that they've been given. With a band coming together, you look at the Beatles or Queen or somebody, these types of bands where every single person has a role to play within that band, but yet they come together as one. And I think that's what Loch Lomond has. It's this idea that you've got different instruments in your still house that you can play in different ways, but it definitely identifiably comes through as Loch Lomond in the finished product. So yeah, it's a flavour factory, as I was saying earlier, and it's fun. That's what's really great about Loch Lomond, is that the whiskies are also designed for drinking. They're brilliant, sluggable drinking whiskies, and I think that's so laudable these days in single malt, to make something that's actually, let's crack it open and drink it and do what it's designed for, which is nice. Yeah.
And same question to you, Michael. I know you go around and you're talking to a lot of customers, clients, bartenders, and people around the brand. How do you explain it to them? And especially if maybe they're not that kind of high up or far on their whiskey journey. and they're not really into the minutiae of distilling. How do you explain Loch Lomond in a way that they can understand and get?
Yeah, it really comes down to that kind of signature style. I talk about, when, like, for me, as Joe was saying, we make our whiskies for drinking. So the flavour experience is the most important thing for me. So I lead with that when I'm talking to people about Loch Lomond. I talk about, when you taste this, you'll get that fruit, you get that honey sweetness, you get that soft smoke. And then just through conversation with them, we can see kind of where their kind of understanding's at and how much they want to go in to, like, where does the fruit come from, where does the sweetness come from, and really lead with that.
Brilliant. Do you enjoy talking to people about it? Or do you prefer being locked in your office, just being the master and the crazy scientist on it?
No, it's probably, I wouldn't be the chattiest person in the world, but when I start talking about whiskey, it's, my wife says, "Oh, you can't shut me up." So it's something that I'm kind of really passionate about, and it's something that I've had very kind of positive experiences with whiskey through my life. I grew up near Bushmills Distillery in Northern Ireland, and everyone around that area, that was our distillery, and people were very proud of that. And everybody had walk into any house and they had a bottle of the kind of white label Bushmills or a bottle of the black label Blackbush, and that was kind of played a role in kind of everyone's life. Kind of every kind of celebration the whiskey came out. So that, like, I grew up seeing how whiskey could be enjoyed and shared and really bring people together, and that's something that we want Loch Lomond to be a part of. Like, Loch Lomond to be that kind of greasing the wheels of those kind of social interactions and celebrations.
Love that. But you had a really interesting kind of route into whiskey, right? Because you just said you grew up near Bushmills, then you went on to study chemistry and biology, and then you kind of went...
I studied brewing and distilling
at
Heriot Watt. So I actually ended up when I was leaving school, I approached Bushmills, and they sponsored me to go to Heriot Watt and study brewing and distilling.
Was that just because you were hanging about the distillery so much?
Just
get this guy out.
Get him away. So right from my first holidays from Heriot Watt, I worked in Bushmills. So I worked there kind of 3 years throughout university, and then when I graduated, Irish distilling wasn't in the best of health. It was very much before the times that we've seen now. So I went into brewing for probably about 10 years.
Is that in Ireland or over here?
In Ireland, with the Bass Brewery in Belfast. So it's the Caffrey's Brewery. And then from there I moved with the company was InBev at the time, from the Bass Brewery in Belfast to the Tennant's Brewery in Glasgow. So I had the experience of making what was very kind of iconically Scottish lager for a couple of years. And then from Tennant's I moved back into whiskey with Loch Lomond. That was 18 years ago now.
Wow.
So I've been here for 18 years, and like you say, every day's you learn something with whiskey. You can spend a lifetime working with it and never know everything. So it's always that kind of, you're kind of not quite rushing, but almost rushing into work to see what am I going to get into today, and so it's good to have that kind of passion about my work.
Fantastic. It's a really interesting one. I think, looking at your background, it definitely that kind of wide range of experience, right, has probably it's opened your eyes to being able to do what you do here, which brings us on to the next one, which is Steam and Fire. And this really talks about the influence of the cask here, right? And one of the things that I love about you guys, and last time I came here, I had an unbelievable experience with Andy, your cooper, taking us around the cooperage there and actually seeing everything that you guys do. And it's so rare now to see a cooperage on site, right?
Absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, how many have you got in Scotland right now? Here, Balvenie?
Maybe Cambus, no, I don't know.
4, I'm hearing in my
4,
earpiece right now.
4, maybe 4. Yeah, it's really rare, isn't it?
Yeah.
Girvan again, it's
Yeah.
a cooperage. I think Glenmorangie, Balvenie, ourselves.
Yeah,
So it's something maybe not quite right, but it's around that.
it's not many at all.
So,
Incredibly rare.
am I right in saying Steam & Fire is almost inspired with what you wanted to do with the cooperage? And
it's like for the majority of our expressions, we base the character on the stills and a spirit character, and we celebrate the stills that we have. But we also, wood is still, while it's not the main character, plays a very important supporting role. And with Steam and Fire, we wanted to recognise or shine more of a spotlight on our cooperage, because it is something that not every distillery has. But more importantly than that, what it does do is give us very tight control over the quality of wood and the impact of that wood on our spirit. By having the craftsmanship here and the understanding of wood, we're able to we have a lot of possibilities in terms of how we can use the charring and the casks that we have. And with Steam and Fire, I think our charring machine, the serial number is 002. So it's one of it's maybe I think the second charring machine from that manufacturer in Scotland. So it's something that we've been part of here for 25 years, and it does allow us to play with the flavours that charring can give, but also then to control that and to give consistency with that flavour. So once we've dialed into something, we then have the support structure there to make sure that we give it consistency, so that we get that exact flavour in that expression all the time.
It is one of when you go around any distillery, it's a very immersive experience. It's the smell of the fermentation in the washbacks, it's the hissing of the stills and the steam from the stills, it's the beautiful aroma you get when you walk into a warehouse. But I have to say, being in the cooperage here is one of the most visceral and elemental things you can ever do. When you see them firing, I'm sure Mitch you've seen it as well, see them firing those casks, and they literally set them on fire. That's what's mental about it, and you're like, wow, that's incredible. And it's a great experience, because that makes such an impact on the whiskey flavour.
And it's, when you say fire, people think you're adding smoke to the character, but what that fire is doing, it's breaking down the structure of the oak, it's releasing sugars and then caramelising them. So what it gives to the whiskey is this beautiful roasted sugar type note. For Steam and Fire, we get a lot of pear and orange from the spirit, but then from the wood, we're getting this lovely roasted marshmallow type character. So those vanillas, those melted brown sugar notes.
I was just going to say marshmallows, but I think that was because I was doing marshmallows a couple of days ago over fire. So.
And that's exactly, we talk about your memory of flavour, and it's important for us that we create things that evoke those memories. So that charring of toasting marshmallows by the campfire, that's really what you get in this glass. So it's a lovely tasting note for us to have.
Yeah, there's almost that's marshmallow s'moresy note in there. I get a little bit of crunchy nut cornflake, that sort of toasted honey roasted nuts, that sort of stuff on the palate comes through nicely. Yeah,
you're good with that, man. You've got a good taste in those. I always remember.
I eat a lot of food. That's the key. Is there the smoke level on this is the same as original, or is it? It feels like maybe the charred cask has brought that to roll it off ever so slightly.
There's a little bit more peat there,
more peat,
but it's to balance the sweetness, the additional sweetness we're getting from the charring.
Yeah, and do you work quite closely then because you've got the cooperage on site and you've got this incredible portfolio of spirit styles that you can draw on? are you working quite heavily on a sort of innovation basis with the coopers? And do you go to them and say, listen, can you really heavily char some casks or really lightly toast some on this level?
I'll stand with them and we'll burn them. So we'll burn maybe 4 or 5 to get the right kind of, and we'll look at them and smell them.
Wow.
And see what the kind of flavour or what kind of smell we're getting straight off the cask, and use that as an indication then of what charring level we want. And then once we've kind of fixed that, I'll kind of say that's what we want, and the coopers agree it. They'll then be able to kind of get 10 or 20 casks at that level, enough for me to do the kind of spirit trials with. So it's very much that kind of interaction with the coopers and seeing directly, looking at what impact the charring is having on the wood at that time.
Amazing.
I suppose the coopers must love that as well, right? Be like, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, they're like, oh no, Mike.
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
here you go.
Here he comes.
Probably more here it comes.
Brilliant.
Let's chat about awards, right? It's one of the things that you guys are really proud of right now. Joel, you and I have sat on awards before as judges. It's a tough thing to win an award. I mean, I've done San Francisco Spirit Awards. You've judged International Wine Spirits Awards before, and it's a full. I mean, for those watching, if you don't understand how the award ceremony works or the judging of these spirit awards goes, you basically do everything blind. You sit with a kind of table like this, right? Six people. You don't know what spirit it is. You might know it's a single malt, but that is it. And then everyone judges individually, and you come together as a group. So I think a lot of people think about awards like, well, is it fixed? Do people pay? You have to pay to get into the awards and put your bottle in, but it's people within the industry that are very well respected. I kind of slipped through the net, I know that, but it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, did you enjoy judging?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it can be quite daunting. You're sitting around a table. I remember sitting once at the IWSC Awards a few years ago, and we were actually going through the finalists in the Scotch category. So the award that Loch Lomond had just picked up, and around the table was little old me, and then you had David Stewart from Balvenie with like 60 years experience. You had Richard Patterson Dalmore with another 60 years experience. You had Bill Lumsden there from Glenmorangie, 40 years experience, and you had Jim Beveridge, the master blender at the time, from Johnny Walker. And this is the level of expertise around the table that is crowning those whiskies. And sometimes some of their whiskies win. It's nothing to do with them being in the room. It's just the fact that it's a collaborative process. But that's the sort of level of expertise that you're getting when you look at these awards. And I think that's a really important element to look at in a day and age where people can be keyboard warriors and go on and review hotels or restaurants because they've just had a bad experience or whatever. No, this is judged like a Michelin star. It's judged by experts with expert knowledge, and I think that's really important to understand when we look at how brilliant the awards that you've earned, Michael, for these are, and the whiskies have earned on your behalf as well. So yeah, but it is a real collaborative process of the people in the room, and I'm sure you've been there, Mitch. There've been arguments about stuff, and people get passionate about certain styles or what works or what doesn't work.
I had a fight with someone at the table, like a floating night. But on that note, Michael, like out of all the awards that Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia has won as well over the last. I think I want to say over the last 5 years it's just gone kind of crazy. Which one are you most proud of? Is there any that stands out for you? Any kind of moment that you're like, wow, that's amazing that we won that?
I think it's more the kind of the ongoing kind of nature of the awards that we're kind of maintaining a standard. So I would be probably more of that I would worry if we kind of stopped. Because then I'm doing something wrong.
You
so
feel
as
the
long
pressure?
as they're coming, so as long as they keep coming, I know I'm doing something.
It's like Pep
right.
Guardiola reviews, right? Keep it going.
But for me and for the people that kind of work at the distillery, the awards are important to us because they raise an awareness of what we do. You both touched on the kind of the judging panels. So the awards, like people can say you pay to enter, but if you look at what that money does, it brings a very high quality of judging panel and a very kind of independent judging panel, and it's that kind of, when that recognition comes, you know, it's kind of based on the quality of what those judges are tasting, and to get the recognition that we have, it kind of, for us, it's about giving people the really awareness of who we are and what we do, but also the reassurance and the confidence to go and buy our whiskies. So for me, you know, these awards are kind of central to what we do in kind of raising the awareness of Loch Lomond and bringing more people into Loch Lomond and sharing our whiskies with them.
That's amazing. Very cool.
Very good.
Should we move on to our third dram, chaps?
Yeah, really
So-
love that steam and fire. I think it's delicious. Really good.
Great colour on it as well. So we're going to move on to the third dram, which is going to be the 12-year-old. Now, one of the things that you always talk about with Loch Lomond 12-year-old is that it's perfectly balanced. So what does that mean, perfectly balanced? How do you explain that?
Yeah, so really for me, the Loch Lomond 12 is the best representation of what we do at the distillery. And we talk about the kind of the fruit character, the sweetness and the soft smoke. For me, those three aspects of flavour are all equally important. So I wanted to create an expression that, you know, had give those equal kind of airtime. And the 12-year-old perfectly balanced is that. It, you know, it showcases the fruit characters. So lots of orchard fruit, lots of apple, pear, kind of lemon, citrus. You know, we get that through the kind of our mashing, very slow mashing, clear worts, very active fermentation, longer fermentation times. So this kind of celebrates the work that we do to create fruit flavours and then use our remarkable stills to capture those fruit flavours. It gives equal weight to the cooperage and how we manage, like, the use of first fill bourbon, refill bourbon, first fill recharred casks, second fill recharred casks, how we manage that to give that consistent honey background character, and then really the kind of just that seasoning with the soft smoke. For me, on the palate, you get the fruit, you get the sweetness, and then on the finish, that's when the peat comes through, and it's just a wisp of smoke. To clear the palate, add a bit of crispness and balance, and you're really ready for the next sip. So for me, this is a whiskey that, because of that balance, has a lot of intricate flavours. So if you want, you can sit by yourself and search for flavours, or because it's kind of softer and kind of a refined complexity there, you can enjoy it with friends, very sociable whiskey. You can sit back and you know you're drinking something, but you don't have to kind of overanalyze it.
You'll like this one because you like to just sit by yourself and drink whiskey.
That's me. Just assess. Just sit and nose.
But I don't know about you, Joe, but I think this is the heaviest that we've had so far.
Yep.
It's got the most kind of oils on the palate. It's the most kind of it's got a big sort of mouthfeel, right?
Yeah,
Viscosity around it.
it's got complexity and depth in flavour, as you just sort of showcased, Michael, but it's incredibly approachable and easy to drink, and I think that's a real trick, is to create something with layers and complexity that isn't a complex product when it comes to sipping it, and that's just delicious. And I think to some degree that showcases in the glass the incredible still house and the remarkable stills that you got here, because on the face of it, it could be incredibly complicated, but actually it's incredibly simple. It's about flavour, and this is yummy. That's my tasting note for this. Just yummy. Yeah. When
you're drinking whiskey yourself, how do you do it? Do you add water in, or?
Yeah. So most of the time when I'm drinking it is just the whiskey with a dash of water. It's not set kind of how much water I add. I just add a bit nose, and when I think it smells right, that's when I'll drink it. But probably the more I get into whiskey, the more I find different ways of drinking whiskey. So, you know, I'm really into kind of highballs and kind of ice, that slice of lemon, slice of lime, just really kind of cold, chilled, crisp flavours. I think the first whiskey we had tonight, Loch Lomond Original, is absolutely wonderful for like highballs. It's probably something I drink most of socially. Then probably after that, whiskey with kind of cheese or chocolate, I'm an absolute sucker for.
I'm with you there.
But it's probably more I have to watch kind of the alcohol intake and the calorie intake with it. So and then whiskey with food, like the last whiskey that we move on to, I'd probably drink that a lot in the summertime, Loch Lomond 18, because we talked about kind of, as we're kind of moving through the whiskies, moving up in weight, and kind of the 18-year-old with that kind of heavier character. It's great for barbecues. It's great for kind of whether it's a steak or a burger on the barbecue and drinking a glass of Loch Lomond 18 with it.
Nice. So thank you for moving on to the 18. We'll move on to the 18 and have a little dram of it. But you know, when I think one of the things that you think about with Loch Lomond is you talk about innovation, but you've still got this heritage, and you've still got some amazingly old stocks here, right, that you get to play with. How does that work for you? Do you buy into the fact that the lion's share of the nose and the palate from a whiskey comes from maturation?
No, I think it's all about the biggest impact on whiskey flavours, the people making the whiskey.
Okay.
Because it's the people who make the whiskey decide how much spirit impact there is and how much wood impact there is. So with Loch Lomond, we want to celebrate our stills, and that's why we kind of base all our expressions on this wonderful spirit character, and we choose to use the wood influence as a support to that. So even and how we kind of manage that is like the original, the first whiskey we had today. It's a non-age statement, but it's about 5 to 8 years old, and it'll be up to 50% first fill bourbon.
Okay.
So as we move through them, the 12-year-old is probably 20% first fill, 80% refill, and the 18-year-old is 100% refill wood. So as we go up in age, the longer the whiskey is staying in contact with the wood, the softer the wood influence is, so the more kind of less first fill casks we use and the more refill casks we use. So we're always balancing that kind of spirit character with the wood influence, even over time.
What do you think right now with the rules kind of opening up around with the SWA and casks that you're allowed to use? Are you excited about that, or do you think that's something negative for the industry?
I think that the rules as they stand allow for a huge degree of creativity or a huge degree of flavour potential, and it's down to distillers to be creative about how we kind of play within those rules. I think it's, people ask what's the difference between Scotch whisky or Irish whisky or American whisky. The country that they're made in is a good answer, but it's the rules that say that whisky must be made in that country. So it's the rules that we play with, define the processes and the materials that we can use to create the flavours. So the rules are kind of central in giving whisky its identity. So for me, the SWA, they do kind of get a hard time about kind of keeping like the rules in Scotch, but keeping the rules is important to keep Scotch's identity. I think that ourselves and distillers like Inchdarney, we're very creative about how we kind of play within those rules. We put a lot of effort and resource into kind of making sure that what we're doing is in line with what the Scotch Whisky Association's view on Scotch is, but we're able to then create flavours and that are kind of not usual, and give people who drink our whiskies a different experience, and allow them, when they taste our kind of more innovative spirits, something like give them a flavour experience that they don't get with other Scotch whiskies or other world whiskies.
I think you've also got the ability here with your cooperage to have a bigger influence on those casks initially. And it's all a bit like sort of tennis players who, a tennis player is a player in isolation, but when they win a tournament, you look back at who they thank, and they thank their nutritionist and their stamina trainer and their masseuse and all the whole team that goes into making them successful as what they are as an individual player. And you have an individual distillery, you have a single malt distillery, but you've got a whole team around you that allows you to be a success through small changes in different areas, like having the cooperage, being able to play tunes with the casks. And I think that's a really remarkable thing. And it's a bigger thing than a team of one, this, isn't it?
You talked about kind of the people that go into making a whiskey, and whiskey isn't like it's a very kind of various stages to it, right from kind of the cereal growing in the field, through the maltings, through the mashing, the fermentation, the distillation. A lot of that happens before all of that kind of flavour impact happens before it gets to the cask, and that's something that kind of we kind of celebrate with Loch Lomond. We celebrate the stills, we celebrate the yeast, like all these kind of potential flavour points give us huge potential for flavour creation, and to give people like wonderful experiences when they drink our whiskies.
Great.
I think one of the last questions I want to ask you when it comes to maturation is, you guys have got some very old whiskies as well. We think about what we're trying right now with Loch Lomond, but one of the things that people maybe don't realise is you have a 50-year-old Loch Lomond, right? Which is we've got some of that coming, haven't we? Did you guys got your 50-year-old in the packs, right? You guys didn't get him 50. What's
come on?
So how is that when you're working with a whiskey that's been in cask for half a century? You get nervous with that, or are you looking at that all the time?
It's a long time to make it right if you make a mistake with it. So it's no, it probably there is a responsibility there that when you are working with a spirit like that you treat it very lightly. The most important thing with whiskey at that age is to taste it and to know the character, and to kind of understand how the kind of flavour journey it's been on and what it could future flavour journey could be. So the likes of the 50-year-old that we're releasing this year, I started tasting that maybe 15 years ago.
Wow.
And I've kind of been working with it since kind of 2010, 2011. So I kind of have a really good understanding of how that flavour was back then and how it's progressed over the last 15 years. So to get whiskey to 50-year-old, it is a case of kind of identifying those casks. Once you get to kind of 25, 30-year-old, you're almost down to individual cask management. It's really, it's very hands-on kind of process of kind of getting to know the state that liquid is in at that time, and then following it through its journey. When we're at quite a large distillery here, we're producing 3 million litres of malt, 10 million litres of grain a year. How many casks a week that is, my maths isn't probably good enough to work out. It's a huge kind of number to start with at 0 years. So we're talking about say kind of 13 million LA a year, probably probably 60,000-70,000 casks a year that we're filling. So probably maybe 2,000 to 3,000 casks a week that we're filling.
That's some good maths right there, Michael.
Yeah,
So
that's good maths. Quick maths.
To go from that at zero, where we're at like, when we get to like 25, 30 plus, it's kind of, we're down to like single digits.
Yeah.
So, when we are on the 50-year-olds, it is that very tight control over the very individual management of casks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Right, so you ready for some quick fire questions that we got in from the audience?
Yeah. So,
Brace yourself.
What is your favourite spot in the distillery?
It's probably the still house, because we're, again, I don't know how many distilleries will have this, but we have a row of washbacks down one side, and then we have a row of our stills down the other side. So I can look in, I like looking in the washbacks and seeing the yeast bubbling away, because that just gets my head going, thinking that's where the flavour's coming from. 'Cause I'm kind of a real thing about yeast and how much the yeast can impact the whiskey flavour. So I get, when I stand in the still house, I can see the yeast doing its work and its magic, and I look across and I see the straight neck pot stills. I can see all those, well, imagine all those flavours kind of rising up into the neck of the spirit, all the kind of flavours we don't want falling back down, and all the great flavours going into the new make. So it's probably the still house where I kind of can imagine all the flavour creation.
Because even when you're standing at the distillery, you're thinking about the flavours. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'm a warehouse guy. What about you?
Tasting room guy. I mean, why not? It's the best part.
Tasting in the warehouse.
Of course, that's even better. Yeah.
I might have done that earlier on, but let's not talk about that. Right, so another question. Someone wrote in saying, I've always wondered, why don't you use water from Loch Lomond in your whiskey?
Well, we're kind of, the distillery's slightly off the loch. We're on the banks of the River Leven that comes out the south end of Loch Lomond, and the water from the loch kind of comes out into the River Leven, and then it's kind of absorbed into the groundwater that the distillery sits on. And what we have is, we have 9 boreholes on site, so we actually tap into the groundwater and use that for making the whiskey. So in a kind of roundabout way, we're tapping into the groundwater that comes from the river that comes from the loch.
Yep.
So in a roundabout way, it is Loch Lomond water that we're using for our whiskey.
Great.
But you haven't got a hose in the
No,
in the loch, like sucking it
kinda
up.
sucking out Loch Lomond water.
Have you guys ever, we have a lot of water here in Scotland. I know 2018 we had a couple of shortages. Have you guys ever been near that point, or is it pretty, must be pretty good here, right?
Yeah, it
West
is. We've kind of never had that issue. We've had the opposite issue a couple of times where we're kind of, our warehouses are here and 10 feet away is the River Leven.
No.
So this whole site's actually been flooded in. The last time was Christmas 2009. This site was under about 3 feet of water.
Wow.
Oh, was that crazy winter we had all the snow as well?
It was before that.
Was it?
It wasn't. It was 2006. It was the year I started here in January 2007. And when I started here, we were kind of refitting the offices because of the flood damage.
Right. You've kind of answered this question a little bit with regards to the older whiskies, but someone asks, how long does it take for the initial idea to a finished whiskey?
So it varies with where the idea is coming from. When we talk about, we can look at kind of the mature stocks we have, and we can create a new expression from our existing mature stocks within about 6 to 12 months. But when it comes to really spirit innovation, like we're doing work on cereals with single grain, with yeasts for our single malts, and that, like with the single grain, we're doing some work with like oat mixed mash bills. So we're using
Phone's listening to
so with our single grain, we use the current single grain that we have bottled now is 100% malted barley. We've been looking at using a mixed mash bill of kind of oats and malted barley, or unmalted barley and malted barley, or rye and malted barley, and that works really about a 5 to 7 year time frame. Just because it's column still, it matures a bit faster, so we're able to get that to market a little faster. When we look at single malt, the work that we're doing with yeast, probably looking at about 15 years. And that's about a couple of years to get the kind of fermentation right, the distillation right, to know that we're creating the flavours and then we're capturing the flavours. So if you look at like our Chardonnay wine yeast, we started work on that in about 2005, and the first kind of major release we did of that was 2020.
Gosh.
Very cool. So, final question. Can you walk us through a day in the life of Joel Harrison? No, sorry, a master blender. What does your average day look like?
Let's say in the morning it's really coming in and seeing how the kind of, again, it's based on timelines, and I look after the spirit supply to the bottling hall. So when I come in the morning, it's really to check that the spirit going for bottling is there, the quality's right, and that kind of spirit's moving out to kind of keep the bottling hall running. After that, it's really looking at, so that's like immediate day to day. After that, it's looking at kind of 1 to 3 months ahead. Like, what vattings do we need to be doing? Is there any cask finishes coming out, marrying to be done? So we'll look at kind of planning that. And that's most mornings. The afternoons, it's either spent on like what people would expect, the product development and kind of cask sampling, where one afternoon I'll maybe nose like 100 to 150 cask samples. I think that's probably what people see a blender doing. But
nosing, not tasting, right?
Nosing, yeah. So tasting about 20% of that, spitting out. Definitely, because I drive to work. So that's what people kind of picture blenders doing, but that's maybe 1 or 2 afternoons a week. 3 or 4 afternoons a week it's spent in front of a computer on spreadsheets, looking at whiskey stocks and trying to predict what's going to happen in 10 years time. And the one thing that you're guaranteed to happen with whiskey stocks is that you'll get it wrong. So it's kind of the least or the most thankless task you do, but it's really just kind of scenario planning and making sure that whatever expressions we're creating, that we can supply them in kind of 5, 10, 20, 15 years time.
Amazing. Incredible work.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely bonkers.
One of these days, mate, we'll be making whiskies, right?
Yeah. Not behind a spreadsheet though, hopefully. In the
well,
minds.
Guys, thank you so much. I think we're pretty much bang on time here. So, one thing I say, thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you want more information about Loch Lomond, check out the website. It's unbelievable. There's a load of information on there. So lochlomond.com. Then obviously social media, Loch Lomond, great posts on Instagram there as well. But gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
Slangeval. Yeah.
Slangeval.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.